Hello, everybody, and welcome to A Day for Adventure, the premier outdoor podcast that'll get you off your butt and outside. I'm Will.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Trevor.
And in this week's episode, we're going to be talking about how to stay safe on the trail, or how I prefer to call it, how not to be a dipshit on the trail. So this episode, we're going to be focusing on mistakes. As to quote an old advice account Trevor and I used to have, we make the mistakes and learn from them so you don't have to. And so we're going to be going through a bunch of the mistakes and dangers of when you're going to be on the trail. If you want to learn how to prevent these, check out our planning podcasts for some safety tips. But I do want to start off with easily one of the most dangerous mistakes you can make, which is overestimating your skill and fitness. This mistake is how you die.
Okay.
Because if you take on something far beyond your ability, or put yourself in a situation you're not prepared to handle, you could very well get yourself killed. And as while this will be a mostly funny episode, we are going to hit this one a little bit more seriously. If you don't have the skills or are in the physical shape to safely do your trip, you put yourself in danger and everyone else who's with you, as they have to essentially compensate for your inabilities. This includes everything as your small day trips in a group you don't know to your multi-day backpacking trips. People may end up going out and taking on areas or trails in poor weather when they're not prepared, and when they get hit with bad weather, can die. And it is such a serious and very important thing to be prepared, because most of your injuries and issues can be solved just by being humble about your abilities and being ready and understanding the skills and techniques you will need to complete it. Now that we've gotten this more serious topic out of the way, let's just go through all the mistakes you can make before, during, and even after you're on the trail.
So, of course, involving William's comment that he made about being prepared, probably the first step of actually being prepared is planning your trip before you go on it. Now, this is one of those things that if you are the unfortunate sod who decides to make the very, very, very poor mistake of not planning out your trip very thoroughly or too thoroughly, you might make some of these big mistakes. So, one of the ones that I think everybody gets wrong, including myself, and I think I have overestimated my ability to predict weather by just like miasma a few too many times. So the weather is kind of annoying. You should be paying attention to it. In some places, the weather, you don't really have to worry about it too much. Like, for example, if you live in the Sahara Desert, you kind of know exactly what it's going to be every single day. It's going to be sunny, hot, completely unforgiving every single day. Everybody knows that. But if you don't live in the Sahara Desert, you're going to have to pay attention to your weather. And if you live in places like the Midwest United States, like we do, sometimes the weather does not like to play in your best interest and might change on an absolute whim. There was a joke we had where I worked, which is, I read it on Apple Weather. Do not trust Apple Weather, okay? Don't just trust one source. Pay attention to everything going on around you. This is another thing to keep in mind. When you're paying attention to the weather, check all the areas that you might be around, but don't take any one of them as gospel, because odds are once you get out into the woods, you're probably going to be seeing a much greater extreme. So that all being said, pay attention to your weather conditions, bring the right equipment to handle said weather conditions. You do that, you'll be fine. If not, you might be soaked, like I have been on too many occasions. So the second thing, when it comes to the planning aspects that are like big safety things that are funny but also not funny at the same time, is letting people know what you're doing or telling people where you're going, right? So in boating and piloting things, you're required to, in some areas, actually have a trip plan. And in some places at national parks, you might also be required to have the trip plan, right? And the point of these is really just to make sure that anybody who's working in a certain area of operation knows where you kind of are supposed to be. of course, if you aren't in a national park or out in the middle of international waters, you probably are not going to have to deal with those kind of things. But in those cases, if you're just going out to go camping for a weekend, you should still let somebody in your family know that you're going to be going off to do this, or let your friends know that you're doing this, to let them know where you're going, when they should expect you home, so that if something goes wrong and you're not back and nobody somehow finds out where you are, nobody's like, hey, where'd that Ben guy go? Right? So they know what's going on. Okay. Now, the other big one that everybody makes the mistake of for the first or second time, they kind of figure out what they know later on, unless their name is me. And then in that case, I make this mistake too much. It's not really understanding where you're going to be really going. So that's going to be paying attention to like the kinds of people who are going to be there, how many, are the trails going to be crowded? Are there not going to be people at that park? Is the climate and the conditions going to be preferable? What the terrain's going to be like? Make sure that you do your research so that when you get out there, you're not surprised. And kind of the final one, and this is one that William and I have made the mistake of doing on two separate occasions, and that was not knowing where water sources are. The first time was when we went to South Kettle Moraine, and we thought that we were going to be fine with a liter of water, and then we realized there was no fill-up spot when we got up there, so we had to hike about, what was it, William, 8 miles?
Between 7 and 8.
Between 7 and 8 miles in 95-degree weather with a single liter of water for each one of us. Was we didn't make that mistake again until we did when we went to Philmont Scout Ranch, and our last day we decided, oh, it's only a 6 or 7 mile hike, we should be fine. And then we realized that all the terrain was absolutely terrible, really hilly, and we were going through water like it was water, and we ran out of water quite literally halfway down the slope that we needed to get down on our second to last day. And my gosh, that was a fun experience. So kind of planning things out, even the day before you do it, or even when you're already out there, make sure that you take a little bit of time to think about where you're going, where you're going to be hiking, what terrain you're working with, and kind of like your water sources, because you need water to survive in the short term. So those are things to pay attention to.
Yep. Also make sure that when you are looking for those water sources that you have the correct filtration advice. Because Ben and I have had nice and tasty carcass water.
Scrumptious.
We could have had a very poor time with that if we didn't have our, I think it was MicroPure tablets.
MicroPure, hyper high concentrations of chlorine made the water taste like a swimming pool. It's pretty great.
But it's better than carcass water.
Yeah, it is definitely better than sulfur water.
Yeah, I mean, there was literally a dead animal by it.
Yeah, within 10 feet of where we got our water from. We're just like, oh, there's a dead deer in the water. It's fine.
And our guide goes, yeah, that's fine. Just add a little bit more MicroPure to it.
Tasty.
It's just protein, right?
It's floaties. They add character to the water. Because then you know you're actually like drinking water. You're not just like ingesting ethanol or something, okay, right? Deer hair.
All right. I think the next thing after planning, most people think right after planning is the trip, just starting the trip right away. Well, no, there's something in between. You have to get out there. Sadly, a national park is not right out my front door. So when you are traveling, big things to think of is over and under packing. So when you're planning, you should probably be doing your packing. So this part is when you're packing things into your car and even things into your bag. But this goes for literally any trip. You don't want to overpack and you don't want to underpack. Figuring out the perfect amount of packing is a literal art that none of the three of us have conquered yet. So
that's a fact.
So usually packing a little bit on the overside is better. It just depends on how much weight you're getting to. Because when you overpack, you don't forget things. But when you like overpack, and you have a mess kit in your day hiking pack, it doesn't make sense. And it's just adding weight that you don't need because it can get heavy. I guess hitting on that last one is bringing enough water. That goes in for your over or under packing. As in Ben's story, they underpacked and did not bring enough water. I think the only point that you get to overpacking water is when you go on like a 5-mile day hike and you bring like a 5-gallon bladder. That might be overpacking a little. But next is not planning any stops on your way out there. So if you're going for a drive, like when I drive out to West Virginia, this isn't the greatest example, but when I drive out there to work at a camp out there, it's a 10-hour drive for me. So I should be planning stops somewhere along that path. On my way back, I stopped at a candy factory, but I did not stop for lunch or dinner. So I obviously have my priorities in perfect check. But eating meals, if you have long trips, it's just eating meals, getting gas, taking a break. So if you're tired, like I started one of my trips at like 4 a.m. so I could avoid Chicago traffic, and stopping at rest stops to just take a nap is a great thing. Another thing going with cars is if you're attaching stuff to the outside of your car, like a canoe or a kayak, make sure it's attached first off. Those things will fly right off. And then make sure it's attached. I don't know what the best word for it. Make sure it's attached well, I guess. So especially for like a canoe or a kayak, you're going to want some padding in between like the top of your car and the canoe, because one of them will scratch the other depending on what material you have, or they'll just scratch both ends, and that's not something you want, especially when you don't own the car. That's my problem. And then lastly is don't be a dumbass on the road. You're probably going to be traveling with your friends. Don't play the I'll cover your eyes and I'll tell you to accelerate or decelerate or turn left or turn right. That's not a real game. I mean, someone's probably done it, but it's not. You shouldn't be the person to do it. Also just following, I guess, basic traffic laws so you don't die. I guess that's the easiest thing.
Can't hike if you're dead or in jail.
Yeah, true.
And don't listen to music that it compels you to go faster. I think that's an important one, especially for me.
Or always listen to music because you have a 10-hour drive by yourself.
Good point.
Actually, I did start listening to podcasts on the way back. 40-minute podcast makes you go, oh, wow, I just finished like a tenth of my trip.
Alrighty, now that we have not died planning and we've not died getting to the trip, now it's time to not die
on the trail.
No, not die on the trail.
Damn it.
First one, important one, is you must stay hydrated. Because there is a phrase that everyone should know. Do you remember, Trevor?
Huh? What? Oh, the one that all the scouts hate, and I love saying.
Yes. Yeah.
Hydrate or dehydrate.
Hydrate.
We were very out of sync, but I think they get the point.
Hydrate or dihydrate. Because a dead scout or a dead hiker can have no fun.
If you die on Everest, though, you can become a trail marker.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah, but I mean, I think living's a bit more fun there.
Yeah.
Now, to not die or to get hurt on the trail, let's go on a few quick tips. Number 1, don't overdo it early on. Don't start the day by running up the mountain. Save that for the end so you can collapse in the parking lot. Number 2, look where you're going. Because it's very easy to take one wrong step and have a lovely surprise. And while ideally that lovely,
it's rattlesnakes.
Yeah. Rattlesnakes
for later.
And there are a few trails where there's just sheer drops on the edge of trailheads. Especially when you get into some of the more sketchy trails in the backcountry. A wrong step and you go down.
There's one popular trail. What is it? Angel's Landing? Angel's something? Where it's just like 3,000 plus foot drops on either side of you. You have like the width of a trail for like one person. It's out west. It's popular because I want to do it. I've seen it.
Yeah. but that's why you gotta look where you're going so you don't die. Now, also, don't screw around. Ideally, don't screw around at all, but especially not in sketchy situations. And those sketchy situations means if you can light yourself on fire or fall off a mountain, don't be an idiot. I'd recommend not being an idiot in general, like trying to ride road gates?
Wait, what was it again?
Riding the car gates.
Oh yeah, the yellow metal car gates outside each cabin.
Yeah, I'd recommend
You
not
put
riding
one
that.
friend on the very end, and they spin all the way around, and you push/run as hard as you can until it bends.
Whee!
Wait, no, that's what you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, not supposed to do, Trevor.
Ryan.
Oh, just trying to pass the blame. I see this.
It was Ben's
Anyway.
fault. He wasn't there.
Exactly. It was my fault. I instigated it.
Yeah, anyways.
I influenced Trevor, like through telekinesis or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he forced him to move with his mind.
Exactly.
Anyways, also, don't misuse tools. Using your knife as the blade of your knife as a can opener, more sketchy situations such as screwing around with axes, because you do not want to be the guy known as the peg leg hiker.
I think he's adding me.
He's adding me and he doesn't even know it. I almost filleted my entire pointer finger and my palm trying to open a disposable camera with the waterproof casing around it. What, 4 weeks ago at camp? I was using the back side of my knife instead of the front side. If I'd used the front side, it skipped off, slid from the pointer part of my finger down till it hit my thumb and then came down. Because I was putting that much pressure on it.
Ooh.
I think what we're learning through this situation is don't be Trevor.
I narrowly avoided about probably 7 to 10 inches of stitches across my hand.
Again, don't screw around like Trevor.
I mean,
Anyways, in addition to the other dangerous camp situations, don't screw up your tent setup, especially if it's close to the water. That one's less funny because people have actually died from that. And then no flammables in tents, because those lovely waterproofing and materials are very flammable. And I don't think you want to turn your tent into a campfire.
Honestly, I think every tent material is flammable. I'm trying to think of a tent that doesn't use like polyester or wood. Fuck.
I don't know if the poles are flammable, but I still wouldn't want to light my tent on fire to see.
Well, yeah, but the poles aren't going to do anything if you're inside a flaming polyester or what's the other one? The one canvas.
Canvas.
That might take a little bit to get on fire, but once it's on fire.
In other words, don't set your tent on fire.
Be logical. Don't put a fire in or next to a tent.
I follow again. This is the don't be a dipshit.
So we should just name this episode.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a unanimous decision right there.
Alrighty. Story time.
Oh, is this story time already?
Yeah, it's already.
Oh, I'm so ready.